When the strangers arrived, the Inca called them Viracochas, gods. They rode beasts with silver feet, spoke to silent white cloths, and seemed to command lightning. The Inca Empire, stretching across mountains, prepared to welcome divine authority. It was a catastrophic misunderstanding. These weren't gods sent from the heavens. They were men who had just sailed across an ocean, armed with steel, germs, and an insatiable appetite for gold. The mask was about to come off in the most brutal way imaginable. While the Spanish conquistadors were making their first ragged footprints on the shores of Peru, the true heart of the Inca Empire was beating nearly 200 leagues away. In the magnificent city of Cusco, Manco Inca, son of the sun and ruler of the known world, held court. He governed with the full authority passed down from his father, blissfully unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down by a few hundred strangers. The first news didn't come as a declaration of war, but as a confused whisper, a bizarre story carried on the wind from the north. Messengers arrived, not from the coast, but from his own half-brother, Atahualpa, a man with questionable legitimacy and a great deal of ambition. At the same time, reports trickled in from the Tayanas, a people of the lowlands who had seen the newcomers with their own eyes. The story they told was not of invaders, but of gods. They called them Viracochas. It was the name the Inca reserved for the ultimate creator of all things, a being of immense power and cosmic significance. The Tayanas were convinced it could be no one else. These strangers were profoundly different, not just in their pale appearance but in every custom and piece of clothing. They rode upon massive animals, creatures unlike anything the Inca had ever seen, whose feet glittered with what looked like silver, a detail that baffled and amazed the coastal observers who had never seen a shod horse. The divine evidence kept mounting. The Tayanas reported seeing these beings talk to white cloths, holding them in their hands and staring intently, as if having a conversation with a silent partner. To a culture without a written language, the act of reading a book or a letter was an incomprehensible piece of magic. The descriptions became more and more fantastical. The Viracochas had stately, imposing figures, with beards of black or red, a feature alien to the clean-shaven Inca. They ate their meals not from pottery, but from polished silver plates, a display of casual wealth that was staggering. And then there was the thunder. The strangers carried metal tubes that roared with a sound the Inca called yapas, the word for a thunderclap. In the Inca worldview, thunder came from the sky, from the gods themselves. To see a man command it from a handheld object was to witness a miracle. Every strange detail, from their glittering horseshoes to their incomprehensible books, built a singular, terrifying conclusion. These were not men. They were deities walking the earth, and they were heading for the city of Cajamarca, where Atahualpa was waiting. Atahualpa, entangled in a bitter civil war with his brother Huascar Inca, was in no mood for divine visitations, but he was curious. He received two of these strange Viracochas at his camp. Following the highest custom of his people, Atahualpa personally offered one of the Spaniards a drink from a golden cup. It was a gesture of respect, an invitation to communion, a sacred act of diplomacy. The Spaniard, utterly oblivious to the honor being bestowed upon him, simply knocked the cup away with his hand, spilling the precious drink onto the ground. The air grew thick with tension. To Atahualpa, this wasn't just rude, it was a profound insult, a rejection of his authority and his culture's most sacred traditions. The mask of divinity had just shown its first crack. Still fuming from the wasted drink, Atahualpa had to endure another strange presentation. The two Spaniards, likely a friar and an interpreter, showed him a book or perhaps a letter. They explained, through a bewildered translator, that this object contained the words of their god and their king, the true divine authorities of the world. Atahualpa, who had just seen his own divine offering thrown to the dirt, was not impressed. He took the object, this mysterious talking cloth, and looked at it. It meant nothing to him. It was just a thing. Enraged by their disrespect and their bizarre demands, he said, "What is this supposed to be that you gave me here?" and threw it down. "Be gone!" he commanded. The two Spaniards, likely shocked at this blasphemy, had seen enough. They turned and made their way back to their leader, Francisco Pizarro, to report on the man who would dare to defy the word of God and refuse a gift from the King of Spain. The meeting was a disaster of cultural miscommunication. For the Spanish, it was proof of a defiant heathen. For Atahualpa, it was proof that these were no gods he had ever heard of. The two Spaniards who returned from Atahualpa's camp carried a story of defiance, but their leader, Francisco Pizarro, heard something else entirely. Opportunity. While Atahualpa was preoccupied, celebrating festivals and waging a bitter civil war against his brother for control of the empire, the Spanish were quietly reinforcing. 40 or 50 more Spaniards rode into Cajamarca, their horses well equipped, their armor polished, and their purpose clear. They were not a diplomatic mission. They were a patient predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Atahualpa, hearing that a larger group had arrived, decided to meet them. He was celebrating a festival when the news came, and he set out immediately with his entourage, a magnificent procession befitting a king. But it was a parade, not an army. In one of history's greatest miscalculations, Atahualpa brought no weapons for battle. His thousands of attendants carried no shields, no spears, no armor for defense. They carried only their small personal knives, called thomes, and, almost comically, lassos. The Inca, still mystified by the Spaniards' giant riding beasts, planned to hunt them like a strange new kind of llama. They were not concerned about the small number of foreigners. They were curious, arrogant, and fatally unprepared. They thought they were going to a meeting to put some disrespectful strangers in their place. They were, in fact, walking into a perfectly designed kill box, bringing hunting ropes to a gunfight. This wasn't a failure of courage, it was a failure of imagination. The Spanish met the Grand Inca procession at the Springs of Conac, a league and a half outside Cajamarca's main plaza. They approached Atahualpa with the same line as before, claiming they were messengers from the great Viracocha, sent to instruct him on how to properly know his god. Atahualpa, having already had a taste of their divine instruction, decided to run a test. He once again calmly offered one of the newcomers a drink, watching to see if the insult would be repeated. It was, just like before, the Spaniard dismissed the gesture, the golden cup, and the sacred offering. That was all the proof Atahualpa needed. The last shred of divinity vanished, replaced by pure fury. He rose and looked at the men before him. "If you disrespect me," he declared, his voice ringing with royal anger, "I will also disrespect you." He let out a great cry, a signal of his rage, and perhaps an order to his men to be ready. But the Spaniards were more than ready. They were waiting for that exact moment. As Atahualpa's cry echoed, the trap was sprung. The Spanish had already taken control of the four gates to the city's main square, which was enclosed on all sides. As the Inca procession moved forward, they found themselves being funneled into the plaza, the exits slamming shut behind them. Suddenly, the vast, open square became a pen, and the thousands of unarmed Inca were packed together like sheep, unable to move, unable to flee. The Spaniards apprehended Atahualpa, pulling him from his litter, and then, as the panicked cries of the trapped Inca rose into the air, the killing began. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. The Spanish cavalry charged into the dense crowd, their horses trampling bodies while their riders cut men down with steel swords. The guns, the yapas, the Inca had once mistaken for thunder from the heavens, now roared in their faces, tearing through the unarmed nobles and attendants. There was no resistance, no defense. It was, as one observer noted, like killing sheep. The Spanish moved with brutal efficiency, a small, armored force of destruction against a terrified, helpless crowd. Of the more than 10,000 Inca who had entered the plaza that day, celebrating their king, not even 200 managed to escape with their lives. When the screaming finally stopped, and the plaza was silent save for the groans of the dying, they took Atahualpa. The lord of the Inca, the victorious general, the man who thought he was meeting with a few dozen disrespectful louts, was dragged to a makeshift jail. They stripped him of his royal clothes, leaving him stark naked. They put his neck in shackles and left him there in the darkness for the entire night, a king reduced to less than nothing. The next morning, they gave him his clothes back and began the interrogation. "Are you the king of this country?" they asked. He answered that he was. They already knew otherwise. "There is another one," they said, called Manco Inca. "Where is he?" In that question, the entire Spanish strategy was laid bare. Atahualpa wasn't the prize. He was just the key to a much larger vault. Back in Cajamarca, the Spanish debated their next move, wondering how to approach the true heart of the empire in Cusco. They didn't need to worry. News in the Inca Empire traveled faster than they could manage. The Tayana people from the coast, who held a deep loyalty to Manco Inca as their rightful king, had seen the massacre and understood its implications. Bypassing the Spanish entirely, they dispatched their own messengers on a desperate journey to the capital. They arrived in Cusco, breathless and urgent, and addressed Manco Inca with the highest possible honor. Sapa Inca, they called him. You, our sole lord. They came, they said, to report that a new and strange people had arrived in his lands, the likes of which had never been seen before. These were the Viracochas. The messengers told him everything. They described the arrival at Cajamarca and the capture of his rebellious half-brother, Atahualpa. With great sorrow, they explained how Atahualpa had presented himself to the strangers as the one true lord of the land, a lie that had caused deep grief to them, Manco Inca's loyal vassals. Hearing this, Manco Inca was overcome with a cold fury. Who were these people? How dare they intrude upon his country without his permission or authority? He demanded a full description. The messengers, eager to please, repeated the now familiar catalog of wonders. They were beautiful, white-skinned men with beards. They came by the wind. They ate from silver plates, and their giant sheep, the ones that carried them, wore shoes made of silver. Their clothes were even finer than the Sapa Incas, woven with gold and silver thread. Manco Inca was not a man to be swayed by fantastic stories. He was a ruler who demanded certainty, and he listened to the report with a shrewd and suspicious mind. This story of gods felt too convenient, too strange. He turned to the trembling messengers, his voice low and threatening. He warned them that he and his ancestors had a very specific way of dealing with liars, and they had better be absolutely sure that what they reported was true. If they were so certain, he challenged them, then they should prove it. If you are so eager to testify to the arrival of these people, he commanded, why don't you go and bring one of them to me, so I can see them with my own eyes and thereby be persuaded? It was a power move, an order designed to turn a confusing rumor into a tangible fact he could assess himself. Whether in response to his demand or as part of Pizarro's own plan, 2 Spaniards were soon dispatched to Cusco. When they arrived, they were brought before Manco Inca. He received them not with fear or blind awe, but with the formal, respectful welcome befitting a king receiving foreign dignitaries. He provided them with fine lodging and saw to their every need. The next day, he put on a show. He invited the 2 Spaniards to his residence and hosted a magnificent celebration. It was a calculated display of imperial power, designed to overwhelm and impress. The sheer amount of wealth was staggering, with innumerable pitchers, golden cups, massive bowls, and heavy pots all crafted from solid gold and silver, glittering in the Andean sun. The 2 Spaniards were speechless. They had seen plunder in the camps, but this was different. This was the source, an endless river of wealth flowing from the heart of an empire. Catching a glimpse of so much gold, their greed quickly overtook their sense of decorum. They told Manco Inca that he should let them have some of it. They reasoned that they needed to bring proof of his power and greatness back to their leader, the Marquis Francisco Pizarro. It was a bold request, asking a king to simply give away his treasures. Manco Inca, seeing an opportunity to secure a powerful new ally in his fight against Atahualpa's remaining forces, readily agreed. He gave them a fortune, not just for the Marquis, but for themselves and their companions, loading them up with precious golden cups, intricate regalia, and other priceless pieces from his ancestral vaults. The 2 Spaniards, accompanied by Manco Inca's own messengers, returned to Pizarro's camp. The man the Inca called Macho Capito was more than pleased. He was, according to the accounts, extremely delighted. It wasn't just the treasure, though the exquisitely crafted gold was certainly welcome. It was the political victory. The news from Manco Inca's messengers confirmed that he was the true, legitimate king, the one who was feared, respected, and recognized by all. In an instant, Atahualpa was reframed in Pizarro's eyes. He was no longer a captured king, but a tyrant and a usurper who had defied all laws to steal the kingdom from his brother. Pizarro now had the perfect justification for his actions. He wasn't a foreign invader. He was an instrument of justice, siding with the rightful monarch. The alliance was forged, built on a foundation of mutual interest and profound misunderstanding. Manco Inca thought he had found the perfect weapon to reclaim his kingdom. Pizarro knew he had found the perfect key to unlock it. From the darkness of his prison cell in Cajamarca, Atahualpa could finally see the full, horrifying picture. The news that his half-brother, Manco Inca, had sent messengers and vast amounts of gold to the Spanish was a death sentence. He saw how quickly Manco had aligned himself with these powerful strangers, and how quickly they, in turn, had recognized him as the legitimate king. This wasn't just a political setback, he knew this alliance would be his doom. Cornered and desperate, Atahualpa decided on one final defiant act. He summoned his most loyal captains and laid out the grim situation. These invaders, he explained, held notions contrary to their own, and were now in league with his enemy. He proposed a simple, brutal plan. They would attack, dash their heads in, and kill every last one of them. He believed that even with a few brave men, they could reclaim their land. His generals, loyal to the end, agreed. They determined the day and the hour for the attack. But Pizarro, through spies or perhaps just sheer, paranoid cunning, found out about the conspiracy. As the Inca account wryly notes, the Marquis had them for lunch before they could have him. Knowing of the plot against him, Pizarro wasted no time. He placed spies everywhere and ordered the highest alert. Without delay, he had Atahualpa dragged from his prison out into the open plaza, the same square still stained with the blood of his followers. There, with no resistance and no ceremony, they executed him. They tied him to a pole and garroted him, strangling the life out of the man who had commanded armies, all in the cold, thin air of the Andes. With Atahualpa dead, Pizarro immediately set out, intending to finally meet the man he now considered his true ally, Manco Inca. But the death of a king does not always mean the end of his cause. News of the execution spread like wildfire, and Atahualpa's most powerful generals, a man named Chalcachima and his companion Quizquis, were not broken by grief. They were ignited by it. They were both brave and powerful leaders, and they quickly gathered a great multitude of people to avenge the death of their lord. No matter how quickly Pizarro tried to move, the Inca warriors came down upon the Spanish column like a rainstorm. The Spaniards, vastly outnumbered, suddenly found themselves in a desperate fight for survival, harassed and attacked by a furious army bent on revenge. The alliance Pizarro had forged was about to be put to the test far sooner than he had expected. Word of the Spaniards' distress reached Manco Inca in Cusco. He saw the situation not as a problem, but as a perfect opportunity to prove his worth to his new allies and, more importantly, to use their power to eliminate his remaining internal rivals. He decided to march. Manco Inca, the Sapa Inca, departed from Cusco at the head of a truly massive army of more than 100,000 warriors. It was a stunning display of imperial might, a sea of men moving through the mountains. He came to meet the Marquis, who by that point had managed, through some stroke of luck or tactical skill, to capture the general Chalcachima. Pizarro's relief at seeing Manco Inca's army arrive must have been immense. The Inca king appeared in his full royal splendor, carried in his golden and crystal litters, wearing the royal crown of the empire. The Marquis was overjoyed to see him. In a gesture of both goodwill and shrewd politics, he presented his captive to Manco Inca. "Look here, Manco Inca," Pizarro said. "Here I have brought you your arch-enemy in chains. Decide for yourself what you want to do with him." For Manco Inca, this was the ultimate prize. Chalcachima was not just a rebel general, he was the embodiment of Atahualpa's treasonous campaign. Looking at the captured man, Manco Inca gave a swift and terrible order. He commanded that Chalcachima be burned alive, immediately, right there in front of everyone. It was a brutal act of political theater, designed as a horrific punishment for the traitor and a terrifying example for his partner in rebellion, Quizquis, who was still at large. With the execution done, they marched together to Cusco. The alliance, sealed in fire and blood, seemed invincible. Manco Inca was later satisfied to learn of the death of the other traitor, Quizquis, his internal enemies now completely vanquished. He entered his capital city as the undisputed ruler, with his powerful, thunder-wielding allies by his side. To show his gratitude and to provide for their needs, he called upon all his people to pay a tribute for the Spaniards' sustenance. On top of that, he presented them with another great amount of treasure that had been passed down to him by his ancestors. The Spanish governors and their men received the gifts happily and gratefully. Rich beyond their wildest dreams, they were ready to return to their home country. But Manco Inca, who still viewed them as honored, if strange, newcomers insisted they stay. He wanted to enjoy their company a while longer so they could adequately report on his greatness when they finally returned home. And so they stayed. For many days, the Spanish lived in Cusco in Manco Inca's company, and as the chronicles say, they enjoyed themselves thoroughly, utterly content in the heart of the kingdom they had helped secure and the one they would soon betray. For a time, there was a strange, golden peace in Cusco. The Spanish, enriched beyond their wildest fantasies, enjoyed the hospitality of the king they had helped place on the throne. And Manco Inca, his kingdom finally unified and his enemies destroyed, believed he had mastered the art of politics. But the friendship was a fragile illusion, built on a foundation of gold, and gold is never enough for men who are truly greedy. As the Inca account puts it, the devil, always a friend to evil, seduced the Spanish completely. In secret, they began to conspire, their minds consumed with a single, poisonous question. How could they torment Manco Inca to extort even more silver and gold than the mountains of treasure he had already given them? The alliance was about to be officially terminated. A few days after the plot was forged, while the Sapa Inca was resting serenely in his own house, more than 100 Spaniards came to his door. They came with treacherous intentions, but they hid them behind the false pretext of paying him a friendly visit. Manco Inca, unsuspecting, welcomed them. They surrounded him, their friendly smiles barely concealing their true purpose. Then the hammer fell. "We have found out, Manco Inca," one of them declared, "that you are planning to rise up against us just like your brother Atahualpa in order to destroy us." They informed him that the governor had issued an order for his immediate arrest, and that he was to be put in chains so he could do them no harm. The shock of the accusation left Manco Inca speechless for a moment, then his shock turned to pure, incandescent rage. He looked at the faces of the men he had called his allies, the men he had fed, housed, and showered with riches. "What have I done to you?" he exclaimed, his voice shaking with fury and disbelief, "that you should treat me in this manner and chain me like a dog?" He could not comprehend the sheer scale of the betrayal. "Is this how you reciprocate the favors I have done for you? By guiding you through my land and making you many loving presents of the things that I owned? You are doing me very wrong." He began to list their crimes and his generosity, his voice growing stronger with every grievance. He reminded them of the vast quantities of gold and silver he had sent to them in Cajamarca. He reminded them of the treasures they had taken from his brother Atahualpa, treasures that by all rights of inheritance belonged to him. He reminded them of everything he had given them in Cusco, a fortune he calculated at more than 6 million. His words hung in the air, a testament to his goodwill and their bottomless avarice. It was the speech of a man who had given everything to men who saw it as nothing more than a down payment. The Spanish listened, but they did not hear. They were, as the chronicler states, blinded by their own evil greed. They let him finish his desperate, heartfelt plea, and then they dismissed it with a wave of the hand. Their response was cold, practical, and utterly devoid of honor. "Whatever, Sapa Inca," their leader said, the respectful title now dripping with mockery. "Don't waste your breath making excuses, for we have proof that you are intending to start an uprising in the entire land." The verdict had been decided before they even walked through the door. His defense was irrelevant. The show trial was over. The leader turned to his men and gave the final, chilling order. "Listen, men, bring some shackles." And just like that, the Sapa Inca, the sole lord of the empire, was a prisoner in his own home. Manco Inca thought he was securing his throne with the help of gods. The Spanish just saw a gilded cage with the key left on the inside. These so-called gods dismantled the Inca Empire not with divine power, but with plain human greed. It was a masterclass in betrayal, proving the most dangerous weapon isn't a cannon, but a handshake you can't trust. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more history that doesn't flinch.